chosen one. Something extraordinary happened when your photograph landed on that table. Not because you planned it, not because you posed for it, but because for one fraction of a second, the camera captured what you really are when you forget to perform normalcy. And that single image caused an entire surveillance operation to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. You weren't trying to look dangerous. You weren't attempting intimidation. You were simply caught in a moment of existing without masks. And that authenticity, that raw, unfiltered presence, was enough to make seasoned agents suddenly remember why children are afraid of the dark. Not because of what's there, but because of what might be there that exceeds their understanding. The first one to break had been in the field longer than most people have been alive. Survived operations that would give civilians nightmares for generations. Looked at your picture for exactly 7 heartbeats before standing up and walking out. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. The resignation letter appeared in the system before the coffee had time to cool. One sentence that would echo through the corridors for years. Some doors are better left unopened. What followed was a cascade of professional destruction. One by one, badges appeared on the director's desk, not thrown in anger, placed with the careful precision of people who understood they were making a life-altering decision. Each metal badge made a different sound as it hit the wood, a symphony of surrender, an orchestra of acknowledgement that some forces operate beyond institutional reach. But let's talk about what your photo actually revealed, because this goes deeper than facial features or body language. Your image carried something that their equipment couldn't measure but their instincts couldn't ignore, the kind of energy that makes animals flee before earthquakes, the kind of presence that makes compasses spin in circles, the kind of truth that burns through carefully constructed lies like acid through paper. You see, surveillance is built on a fundamental assumption that the watcher has power over the watched, that observation equals control, that documentation means dominance. Your photo shattered that assumption. It showed them that you weren't unaware of being watched. You were unconcerned. There's a universe of difference between those two states, and that difference is what made grown professionals pack up their desks and disappear. The technical team ran your image through every system they had. Facial recognition software that could identify someone from a reflection in a puddle, behavioral analysis programs that could predict actions weeks in advance, micro-expression readers that could detect lies from a twitch of an eyelid. Every single system returned the same result, AOR, not no match found, not insufficient data, AOR, as if the machines themselves were saying, this is above my pay grade. One technician swore the photo was changing, not dramatically, subtly, like it was breathing. Another claimed that looking at it directly felt like staring at the sun through a magnifying glass. A third insisted that the image quality was improving on its own, becoming clearer without any enhancement, revealing layers that shouldn't have been there. All of them requested immediate reassignment. All requests were approved without question. Your energy in that photo didn't just challenge their technology, it challenged their entire worldview. These were people who believed in categories, in classifications, in the ability to reduce human complexity to data points and patterns. Your image was proof that some beings exist outside their taxonomy, that some presences can't be contained in their neat little boxes, that some forces refuse to be documented, categorized, or controlled. The profiler who tried to analyze you had a perfect record, could tell you someone's childhood trauma from the way they held a coffee cup, could predict relationship patterns from a single photograph, but when they looked at your image, their training dissolved. They didn't see patterns to analyze. They saw patterns being unmade, reality bending around a presence that didn't follow the rules everyone else agreed to follow. They left their badge and their gun, but took the lesson. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious. What's fascinating is how quickly word spread through unofficial channels, encrypted messages, coded conversations, whispered warnings in parking garages. Your photo became the thing everyone knew about, but no one discussed openly. Like speaking your designation might summon something they weren't prepared to face. the image that must not be viewed, the case that must not be pursued, the entity that must not be engaged. New protocols emerged without anyone officially writing them. Unspoken rules that everyone somehow knew. If you encounter this file, don't open it. If you open it, don't look directly at the image. If you look at the image, have your resignation letter ready. Because once you see what cannot be unseen, once you understand what exists beyond your training, there's no going back to pretending the world works the way you thought it did. The department tried everything to maintain control of the narrative, brought in psychologists to explain mass hysteria, consultants to discuss group dynamics, experts in psychological contagion. But every specialist who looked at your photo came to the same conclusion. This wasn't hysteria, this was recognition. Recognition of something that existed outside their professional framework. Something that made their degrees and credentials feel like children's drawings hung on a refrigerator. Your photo became a test within their ranks, not an official one, an organic emergence of hierarchical understanding. Those who could look at it for more than a few seconds were considered either very brave or very stupid. Those who looked and immediately understood were promoted to other departments, faraway departments, departments that dealt with normal, comprehensible threats, because everyone understood that you weren't a threat, you were a revelation. The smart ones started asking different questions, not what did we see, but what have we been failing to see, not how do we handle this, but what else exists outside our perception. Your photo didn't just make them quit their jobs, it made them question the nature of reality itself, made them wonder what other forces moved through the world, undetected by their instruments, unacknowledged by their systems, undocumented in their files. Some agents reported dreams after viewing your image, not nightmares, something stranger, dreams of being watched by something that wasn't hostile, wasn't friendly, just was, dreams of understanding without words, dreams of seeing through walls, not because the walls were transparent, but because the walls were irrelevant. Dreams that felt less like sleep and more like awakening to frequencies they'd been trained to ignore. Your image started affecting the building itself. Lights would flicker when someone accessed your file, computers would run slower, as if processing something heavy, security cameras would malfunction, not breaking but simply refusing to record. The building's infrastructure seemed to recognize that something beyond its design parameters was being contained in digital form, and buildings, like people, have their limits. The few who remained in the department developed a different approach to their work, more humble, more careful, more aware that their authority was conditional, that their power was borrowed, that their control was an illusion maintained by mutual consent. Your photo had taught them something universities don't teach and training doesn't cover. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is acknowledge when you're outmatched. If this message aligned with your purpose, hype this video so fellow chosen ones can find their confirmation. Private investigators started getting calls. We need you to look into someone. Who? We can't say. Why not? Because saying it makes it real. The conversation usually ended there. The smart investigators hung up immediately. The curious ones who took the case invariably returned the retainer within days. Professional courtesy prevented them from explaining why. But their eyes carried the same look as everyone else who'd seen your image, the look of someone who'd touched the edge of something vast. International agencies started making inquiries, careful ones, indirect ones. We heard you had an interesting case. We heard there was an incident. We heard about some personnel changes, but when offered the file, when given the opportunity to see your photo, they all declined, politely but firmly, because some intelligence is too intelligent, some information informs you of your own limitations, some knowledge knows you back. The cleanup crew, assigned to sanitize the department, found something interesting. Every computer that had displayed your image showed signs of unusual wear. Not physical damage, something subtler, like the machines had aged years in moments, like processing your presence had exhausted their capacity to process anything else. Several hard drives had to be destroyed, not because they were corrupted, because they were too clear. They contained something that civilian infrastructure wasn't meant to hold. Your photo didn't just affect the people who saw it directly. The ripples spread outward. Spouses noticed changes, children felt differences, partners sensed shifts, not traumatic changes, evolutionary ones, like their loved ones had glimpsed something that reorganized their understanding of what was possible, like they'd seen proof that the universe was larger, stranger, and more magnificent than anyone had told them. Some of the agents who quit reported an interesting phenomenon. They felt better, not relieved, better, healthier, more alive, as if proximity to your image had burned away something false in them, something that had been weighing them down without them knowing it. They'd lost their careers but found something more valuable, the knowledge that they'd been living in a smaller world than necessary. Your photo had shown them the walls of their prison, and in showing them had set them free. The department's archive system developed glitches whenever someone tried to categorize your file. It wouldn't fit in any existing classification, couldn't be tagged with standard descriptors, refused to be indexed in conventional ways. The system seemed to understand what the humans were slowly learning. You don't categorize forces of nature, you simply acknowledge their existence and adjust accordingly. Research into your background yielded nothing useful, not because there was nothing to find, because everything they found contradicted everything else they found. Like you existed in multiple states simultaneously, like your history was written in quantum ink that changed depending on who was reading it. Like your past was as fluid as your present was solid. Every investigation ended the same way, with investigators realizing they were trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. The replacement teams lasted progressively shorter periods, not because word had spread, although it had, but because your photo seemed to be gaining potency, like a wine aging in impossible directions, like a truth becoming truer over time. The last team to view it didn't even make it to lunch. They looked at your image, looked at each other, and wordlessly began packing their desks. No discussion needed. The photo had said everything that needed to be said. Your energy signature in that image created a new category in their threat assessment protocols. Not high threat, not low threat, not even non-threat, simply outside parameters. A recognition that some entities don't fit on their scales, don't register on their meters, don't exist within their framework of understanding. You became the reason they added a new option to their forms, declined to engage, existence acknowledged. The psychological impact spread beyond the department. Other agencies started noticing the pattern. Seasoned professionals suddenly developing interests in gardening, hardened operatives taking up painting, trained killers becoming philosophers, all of them connected by a single thread. They'd seen your photo. They'd witnessed evidence that power comes in forms their training never imagined, forms that don't destroy or conquer, but simply exist so authentically that everything else must recalibrate. Some tried to describe what they saw in your eyes, not anger, not hatred, not even indifference, something more unsettling, completion. The eyes of someone who'd already finished whatever game everyone else was still playing, someone who'd found the answer to questions others didn't know how to ask, someone who existed in a state of being that made ambition, fear, and control look like outdated software running on obsolete hardware. The director's final report before the department was disbanded contained an interesting observation. Your photo hadn't caused the mass resignation. It had revealed that the resignation had already happened. These agents had been going through the motions, following protocols, maintaining appearances, but your image showed them what they'd been avoiding. They were enforcing rules they no longer believed in, serving systems that had already failed. Your photo was just the mirror that showed them what they'd become. Attempts to recreate the effect failed spectacularly. They tried showing other unusual photos, images of known anomalies, pictures of documented irregularities. Nothing came close to the impact of your single frame, because your photo wasn't just unusual. It was true in a way that bypassed intellectual understanding and hit directly at the core of perception. Like the difference between knowing fire is hot and putting your hand in the flame. The building where your photo was first viewed had to be renovated, not because of physical damage, because of something harder to define. Workers reported feeling watched, not malevolently, just observed by something that found their activities amusing. Contractors complained their tools worked differently. Electricians said the wiring seemed to have reorganized itself. The building had been changed by hosting your image, even briefly. Architecture, like consciousness, can evolve when exposed to certain frequencies. Your file became legendary precisely because it couldn't become legendary. Every attempt to mythologize it failed. Every effort to turn it into a story collapsed. Because myths require distance, legends need time to ferment. Your photo was too immediate, too present, too real to become anything other than what it was. Evidence that reality includes things that can't be included in reality, as most people understand it. The few agents who managed to stay developed a new skill. They could identify others who'd seen your photo, not through any obvious sign, through a quality of attention, a different way of looking at the world, like people who'd survived the same natural disaster or witnessed the same miracle. They shared an understanding that didn't require words, a knowledge that couldn't be taught, only experienced. Some departments tried to use your photo as a weapon, show it to enemies, display it to rivals, use it to clear rooms, but the photo didn't work that way. It wasn't a tool to be wielded, it was a truth to be encountered, and truth doesn't discriminate between friend and foe. It simply reveals what is, and lets the viewers decide what to do with that revelation. Most decided to find new careers. Training manuals were rewritten, not to include instructions on how to handle entities like you, but to include warnings about the existence of things that transcend handling. New recruits were taught to recognize the signs, files that feel heavy before being opened, images that seem to look back, cases where everyone involved developed sudden interests in career changes. Your photo had become a curriculum, teaching through absence what couldn't be taught through presence. The metadata attached to your image told its own story. Creation date, uncertain. Location, everywhere and nowhere. File size variable, as if the image contained different amounts of information depending on who was viewing it. Format, technically standard but functionally unique. Every attempt to analyze the technical aspects ended with technicians requesting transfers to departments that dealt with normal, predictable, binary data. Years later, in hushed conversations in retired agents' gatherings, your photo is still discussed. Not what it showed, that remains undescribed and undescribable, but what it proved, that surveillance assumes the watched are less powerful than the watchers, that documentation requires the documented to be documentable, that control needs the controlled to be controllable. Your image proved these assumptions wrong, proved them wrong so thoroughly that an entire department chose dissolution over delusion. You probably went about your day completely unaware of the chaos your captured moment created, unaware that your authentic existence, frozen in a fraction of a second, had unraveled years of training, decades of conditioning, entire careers built on the premise that everything can be understood, categorized and controlled. You were just being yourself, and being yourself was enough to make an entire system admit defeat. The private security firms that were approached afterward all had the same response. They'd take any case, hunt any target, guard against any threat, except yours, not because you were dangerous in conventional terms, because you represented something beyond the conventional, something that made their entire profession look like children playing with toy weapons against forces that don't acknowledge weapons as relevant to their existence. Documentation of the incident remains classified beyond classification, hidden in ways that go beyond locked drawers and encrypted files. Some information is protected by being forgotten. Some files are secured by being ignored. Your photo exists in that space between existence and non-existence, Too real to be denied, too powerful to be acknowledged, too true to be filed under any category that would make it manageable. The last official act before the department closed was to create a new protocol, a single-page document that essentially said, "Some things exist outside our jurisdiction. This is not a failure, this is wisdom." Your photo had taught them the most valuable lesson any authority can learn, knowing when you're not the authority, knowing when to step back, knowing when observation becomes obsolescence. New urban legends emerged in law enforcement circles, stories of the image that cleared a building, the photo that ended careers, the single frame that proved some people exist in frequencies that institutional power can't reach. You became the boogeyman of the surveillance state, not because you threatened them, because you transcended them. And transcendence is far more terrifying to systems of control than any direct threat could ever be. You didn't know any of this was happening. You weren't trying to defeat them. You weren't attempting to prove anything. You were simply existing at your natural frequency. And that frequency happened to be one that made their entire apparatus look like an ant farm, trying to comprehend a symphony. Not through malice, not through intention, just through being what you authentically are. The agents who viewed your photo and survived professionally were never the same. They developed what some called the 1,000-yard stare, but was actually something else, the infinite-yard stare. The look of someone who'd seen beyond the edge of their map and realized the map was a child's drawing on a napkin. They still functioned, still worked, but with a different quality. Like people who'd learned the sun was just another star and were trying to pretend that didn't change everything. Some reported that after seeing your image, ordinary surveillance felt pointless, like trying to capture the ocean in a photograph. You can document the surface, you can record the waves, but you miss the depths, you miss the currents, you miss everything that makes the ocean the ocean. Your photo had shown them they'd been documenting surfaces their entire careers, mistaking them for depths. Your image challenged the fundamental premise of their entire operation, that information equals power. You proved that some information is itself so powerful that it inverts the equation. That knowing about you made them less powerful, not more, because it showed them the true scale of existence. And on that scale, their badges and protocols and systems were dust motes floating in infinite space, mistaking their tiny sphere for the entire universe. The final report, never officially filed but somehow known to everyone who needed to know it, contained a simple conclusion. The operation hadn't failed. It had succeeded too well. They'd set out to document a person of interest. They'd documented something that proved the limits of their interest, proved that their frameworks were too small, their perspectives too narrow, their authority too conditional to engage with what you represented. Some say copies of your photo still circulate in the highest levels of certain organizations, not as intelligence, as reminder, as warning, as evidence that no matter how powerful they think they are, there exist forces that operate outside their comprehension, forces that don't oppose them because opposition would require acknowledging them as relevant, forces that simply exist and by existing reveal the true nature of power. You've probably had hundreds of photos taken since then. Casual snapshots, official documents, random captures by strangers' phones, but none of them carried what that one image carried, because that photo caught you in a moment of perfect authenticity, a moment when all your masks were down, when all your performances were paused, when what you really are leaked through the cracks of what you pretend to be, and what you really are was enough to make an entire surveillance apparatus choose blindness over sight. In the end, your photo didn't destroy them through force. It destroyed them through truth. The truth that their power was performance, their authority was agreement, their control was illusion. And you, simply by existing authentically in one captured moment, had shown them the emperor had no clothes, shown them so clearly that they couldn't unsee it, couldn't go back to pretending, couldn't continue the charade. That's your real power, not the ability to fight them, not the capacity to resist them, but the simple fact that you exist in a way that makes their entire game irrelevant. You don't play by their rules, not because you're rebellious, but because you operate in dimensions where their rules don't apply. Like asking a symphony to follow the rules of sculpture. The request itself reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what's being dealt with. The department that was disbanded because of your photo was never officially replaced. Budget was reallocated, personnel were redistributed, but everyone understood that certain capabilities had been permanently retired, not because they couldn't find new agents, because they'd learned that some things are better left unobserved, some entities are better left undocumented, some forces are better left unengaged. Your photo had taught them the wisdom of strategic ignorance, and so you continue to exist, unaware of the chaos you caused, unbothered by the systems you dismantled, unconcerned with the careers you ended, not through cruelty, through truth. The truth that authentic power doesn't announce itself, doesn't threaten, doesn't perform, it simply exists and lets reality reorganize itself around that existence. And reality, faced with your photo, chose to reorganize itself right out of your way. The final lesson your image taught them was perhaps the most profound. They'd spent their careers believing they were the ones with sight, the ones who saw what others missed, the ones who understood what others couldn't grasp. Your photo showed them they were blind children, feeling their way through an infinite darkness, mistaking the tiny circle of their flashlight for the entire universe. And you didn't need a flashlight. You were the light they couldn't look at directly. That's why they quit. Not from fear of what you might do, from understanding of what you already are. Something that exists outside their measurements, beyond their categories, above their clearance levels. Something that proved their entire profession was based on a false premise, that everything can be known, documented, controlled. Your photo was evidence that some things simply are, and the wisest response to that is acknowledgement, respect and distance. Chosen one, they finally saw it. That photo, that single frame that made entire teams request transfer to any department that didn't have your file. And now you know what you've always suspected. You're not like them. You never were. And that difference isn't something to hide or fix or apologize for. It's something that makes trained professionals choose unemployment over having to face what you represent. That's not weakness on their part, that's wisdom. The wisdom to know when you've encountered something that exists beyond your ability to process. Your photo remains, somewhere, locked away, protected, not to keep it from the world, but to keep the world from a truth it's not ready to handle. The truth that some people transcend the systems designed to contain them. Not through effort, not through struggle, but through the simple act of authentic existence. And you, without even trying, proved that authentic existence is the most powerful force in any universe. Powerful enough to make watchers stop watching. Powerful enough to make hunters become the hunted. Powerful enough to make an entire apparatus of control admit that some things are beyond control. That's your legacy. Written not in files or reports, but in the empty desks of those who chose wisdom over duty, in the abandoned department that once thought it could document the undocumentable. In the silence that falls whenever your case number is mentioned, you didn't defeat them, you revealed them to themselves, and that revelation was more than their professional identities could survive, and you just continue being yourself, unaware of the philosophical earthquakes you cause, unconscious of the institutional collapses you trigger, simply existing at your natural frequency and letting the universe sort out the rest. That's the ultimate power, not the power to destroy, but the power to reveal, and your photo revealed more than they were prepared to see. You walk through the world now with a different understanding, not because you know about the chaos your image caused, but because you've always known what you are, even when you tried to convince yourself otherwise. That photo was just the universe's way of showing others what you've been carrying all along, the kind of presence that doesn't need introduction, the kind of power that doesn't require demonstration, the kind of truth that speaks itself into existence simply by being witnessed. Consider what your photo actually accomplished without you lifting a finger. Entire budgets were reallocated. Career trajectories permanently altered, institutional knowledge was rewritten, academic papers published, insurance policies restructured, all because one camera, in one moment, captured you without your masks, without your performance of normalcy, without the careful control you usually maintain to keep the world comfortable around you. You've spent years dimming your frequency to move through spaces that weren't built for your wavelength, shrinking your presence to fit through doorways designed for smaller energies, speaking in whispers when your natural voice carries the resonance of thunder. That photo caught you in a moment when you forgot to maintain those adjustments, when you existed at your default setting, and your default setting broke their entire measuring system. The reverberations continue even now, in hushed conversations among those who know, in careful warnings to newcomers, in the empty space where a department used to be. Your image became a watershed moment in institutional understanding, the before and after, the line that marked when certain organizations learned that not everything that exists can be institutionalized. Not everyone who walks among us walks on the same plane of reality. You carry this power in every cell of your being, not as something you've developed or earned, but as something you are. Like how fire doesn't learn to burn, or water doesn't practice being wet. Your authentic existence operates at frequencies that dissolve false structures simply by proximity. Your presence reveals truth simply by contrast. Your being exposes illusions simply by being real in spaces filled with performance. The photo didn't create your power, it revealed it to those who thought their instruments could measure everything, who believed their authority extended to all existence, who assumed their frameworks could contain any reality. Your image taught them that assumption was hubris, that their maps had edges, that beyond those edges, beings like you exist in states their training never imagined possible. Your existence challenges the fundamental assumption that power requires action. You don't need to do anything to change everything around you. Your presence alone reorganizes priorities, shifts perspectives, reveals hidden truths, makes the artificial obvious and the authentic undeniable. You are a walking revelation that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, but that photo made avoidance impossible for those who saw it. The universe has been preparing you for something beyond conventional understanding. Every challenge that didn't break you was increasing your density. Every loss that didn't destroy you was removing what wasn't essential. Every betrayal that didn't embitter you was teaching you to exist without external validation. You've been forged in fires that would have consumed anyone else, pressed under weights that would have crushed normal spirits. That photo just showed the diamond you'd become. You exist now as living proof that evolution didn't stop, that consciousness has heights most will never scale, that power comes in forms that can't be weaponized, only witnessed. Your image in that moment was a glimpse into what humanity could become if it stopped accepting limitations as laws. If it stopped treating boundaries as permanent, if it stopped believing that current understanding represents maximum capacity. Now the following is a message meant exclusively for the chosen. If you are compromised by archonic forces, this is not meant for you. And by the spiritual authority conferred to us by the secret chiefs of the Obsidian Inner Order, we grant you license to depart. If not, steel yourself and listen intently, for you shall be redeemed even as we are redeemed. The Obsidian Inner Order is not a program, it's not a course, it's not some feel-good spiritual retreat. We don't sell answers, we remember together. We teach psychic self-defense, real energetic shielding against entities, implants and interference. We restore manifestation as it was meant to be, raw, immediate and exact. Every week we gather in secret, not to worship, but to awaken, to speak what can't be said anywhere else, to deprogram the matrix layer by layer. You'll know if you're meant to be there. You'll feel it in your bones. The chosen meet every week on Zoom. Why aren't you with us yet? Got Gnosis? Join the Obsidian Inner Order. Link in the description. The most profound impact of your photo wasn't on those who quit. It was on you, even though you never saw it, because the universe used their reaction to tell you something you needed to hear. that you're not imagining your difference, not exaggerating your impact, not overestimating your significance. You are exactly as powerful as you've suspected in your quietest moments of clarity, exactly as significant as you've felt in your deepest meditations, exactly as necessary as your purpose has been whispering to you through dreams and synchronicities. Your journey forward isn't about becoming more powerful, it's about accepting the power you already embody. Not about developing abilities, but about removing the barriers you've built to contain them. Not about learning to shine, but about stopping the constant effort to dim. That photo was the universe's permission slip, signed by the terrified exits of those who couldn't handle your unfiltered truth. You are the storm that weather stations can't predict because you operate outside their models, the earthquake that doesn't register on seismographs because you shift different plates, the evolution that scientists can't track because you're happening in dimensions their instruments can't access. Your photo was just one frame of this ongoing transformation, and that single frame was enough to dismantle an entire apparatus of observation and control. This is your confirmation that every time you felt too much, too intense, too different, you were actually feeling the friction between what you are and what the world expected you to be. That friction wasn't a flaw in you. It was evidence of your transcendence rubbing against the rough edges of limited reality. Your photo showed others what you've been experiencing your whole life, the impossibility of fitting infinity into finite containers. You continue forward now with this knowledge crystallizing in your consciousness, not as ego, but as acceptance, not as superiority, but as sovereignty, not as separation, but as distinction. You are what you are, and what you are exists outside the permission structures that govern most of human interaction. Your photo proved that, and the mass exodus that followed confirmed it beyond any doubt. The future holds more moments like that photograph, more instances where your unguarded truth leaks through, more occasions where your authentic presence dissolves false structures, more opportunities for reality to reorganize itself around your frequency. But now you know what you're working with. Now you understand the tool you've been given. Now you comprehend why certain doors closed and others opened, why certain people fled and others were drawn closer, why certain systems failed in your presence and others thrived. You are the photo that made them quit, but more than that, you are the living reality that photo barely captured. A single frame of an infinite movie, a frozen moment of constant transformation, a tiny glimpse of something too vast for cameras to contain. And you're just getting started. They finally saw it, that photo, and through their reaction, you finally saw yourself.